morning, everyone. On behalf of the Daniella Moffson Foundation, I want to welcome our guest speaker, Rivkah Slonim. The Rebbitzin today is considered one of the preeminent speakers in the Jewish world. She has a very illustrious past. One of the things is she was a forerunner of the Shaliach movement at the universities. And she's known as one of the more famous feminists in the Jewish community. She was an extremely modest woman. And I continue, I struggled. I Googled her, I did every bit of research I could to find out more about her. But I did speak to people in the community and around who know very much about her, and they say she's a star. She currently is the education director of the Rosh Chabad Center for Jewish Student Life at Binghamton. She's also a lecturer there on medical ethics, Jewish medical ethics. The Rebbitzin wears many hats. She's internationally known as a teacher, a lecturer, an activist, a counselor, and a consultant. So she wears many hats. Her focus is on addressing the intersection of traditional Jewish observance and contemporary life, with a focus on Jewish women in Jewish life. She's the author of 2 books, Red and Fire, Jewish Women Find God in the Everyday. Second book is known as The Total Immersion, a mikveh analogy. She's also one of the most popular writers for the Jewish Learning Institute. She has a section called Fascinating Facts. It's a great honor, Rebbitzin, to have you here. And why don't you come on?
Thank you, Mr. Moffson, for that very, very kind introduction. Overblown. That's what introductions are like, it seems. And it's really an honor to be here this morning and to speak Leilui Nishmat for the ascension of the soul of Daniella Moffson, who mic is not on. Should I use my Shabbos mic? So I never knew Daniella personally, but I was extremely moved by her passing, by the amount of love and passion I saw in our students who approached us and said, we have to do stuff for Daniella. It was like this electrifying sense, and I knew this was a special person. And of course we did a challah bake, and we continue to do a challah bake every year in her memory. It's very special to be here with so many Binghamton friends, I have to say. And I know I have to do what I'm here to do, but it would be nice to just sit and chat. We'll do that afterwards. So here we are. It's the 6th of the month of Tishrei. So that's exactly smack dab in the middle of Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. We're 4 days out from Rosh Hashanah and 4 days out from Yom Kippur. So this is the serious time for Jews. It's the days of awe. It's when you're supposed to go to the temple, say hi to God. And it occurs to me that it's interesting and instructive that Rosh Hashanah comes before Yom Kippur. Because actually, if you think about it, it should be the opposite. We should first try to make amends, make it right with God, make sure we're forgiven, and then come before God with a whole laundry list of stuff we need for the new year. So it's kind of backwards. Like if you fell into a tiff with somebody, and then you needed like a really big favor from them, logic would dictate that first you make things right, then you ask them for something else. But instead, we do it backwards, it seems. But it's not at all. Chassidut explains that Rosh Hashanah is all about solidifying our relationship with God, but in a very, very spectacularly and singular way, very counterintuitive, very theologically audacious. The Talmud says that God asks of us on Rosh Hashanah, Tamlichuni Alechem, make me your God, coronate me. I want to be sovereign over you. I need you to make me king. Now, not a moshel, which is a Hebrew word for a despot or a dictator or a tyrant, but melech, a king. And we're taught that ein melech below am. There is no king without a nation. You can't just declare yourself king or queen. There have to be people who want to serve you as king. But what we're taught is that God makes him herself vulnerable to us and says, Tamlichuni Alechem, make me your God. So that's what Rosh Hashanah is all about. Oh my gosh, Alex, and wow, and I get to meet your baby. Hey, Shachar, yeah, I should recognize the father also. Welcome. So, we're coming to Yom Kippur, and we're going to say the confessional, the viduri, and we're going to say Hashamnu, Bagadnu, and we're going to say Slach lanu, Michol lanu, Kaper lanu. Forgive us, pardon us, atone for us. And we're taught that those three terms actually parallel the three aspects of our relationship with God. So there's the king-subject relationship. There's the father-child relationship. So far, that's mirrored in a lot of other theological constructs, a lot of other faith communities. But then we have something singular, the spousal relationship, the way in which we and God are married, as it were. And that's a whole different ball of wax right there. And so I want to pick up on that, because I want to say that Rosh Hashanah comes before Yom Kippur, because if you don't have a relationship with someone, then why do you need them to forgive you? Why would they want to forgive you? Why is that important? If I walk down the street in Manhattan and 6,000 people don't say hello to me, I'm not going to feel snubbed. I'm not going to feel snubbed now. That's the wind. It's nothing personal, right? Here, let's put it here so it doesn't happen again. You all know what you're at, right? Okay. Now we will put this over here. It's not going to happen again. The point is, if you don't have a relationship with someone, then what's the point of Yom Kippur? What's the point of asking for forgiveness? What are you asking forgiveness for? Who are you? Who are you? I'm nobody. So first we come before Hashem on Rosh Hashanah and we solidify our relationship, which, like I said, is kind of like a crazy thing to think about. The infinite, almighty, omnipotent, omnipresent, eternal master of the universe needs little me, finite, Rivkah, here today, gone tomorrow, fleeting, ephemeral. We're going to go to shul again in Yom Kippur and we're going to hear how we are just like a leaf that flutters away, just like a piece of ceramic that shatters, and so many other metaphors. We're going to go over and over this. And yet God says, Tamlichuni Alechem, I need you to coronate me. And only then do I actually want to be sovereign of this universe. God will be sovereign of this universe for as long as God decides to do that. But what we're here to do on Rosh Hashanah, and continue to do through these 10 days, which are not really 10 days, but that's another class, is to nourish that and nurture it and bring it to a crescendo on Yom Kippur, where we actually are in this relationship with God, where God is our sovereign, but not just lip service. Anybody can say Avinu Malkeinu. Anybody can sing Avinu Malkeinu. But what does that look like on a pedestrian Wednesday morning? Is God really Ein Lanu Melech Ela Ata? Do we really only have one spouse? Are we really being loyal? Or are we playing around? And we can get other people all the time. So, that's why a talk on relationship, in my opinion, is best when we use the relationship between God and us as a model. Hey, you don't have to get up early on a Sunday morning and come eat bagels at Chabad of the Upper East Side to hear about relationships. Just turn on TV, turn on the radio, read a book, go to the self-help section. I mean, everybody and anybody has something to say about relationships. So if you're going to do this, you're going to make the effort to be here, then we might as well go for broke. We're going to go for the beginning of relationships. So the first relationship, the notion of an alliance, the idea of a love affair, an affiliation, begins in God's thought process. And God, we're told, has this overwhelming desire, not a need, because a need connotes a weakness. God has no needs, but God has a desire for a relationship with the other, to enter into an association with the other. Our masters teach us that nothing short of this could satisfy God's most desperate desire, his deepest yearning. So, we're going to take a look at how this happens. And I know people like agendas, so I'm going to make this very easy for you. I have 4 points. You'll know exactly where you are. Okay? So in 4 steps, we're going to talk about secrets for lasting relationships. With others, we're going to talk about romantic relationships, but all of these work very well for filial relationships, for professional relationships, for social relationships, and of course, it works for our relationship with God. So let's go back to a time before time, before space, before delineation, before contraction, before constriction, before definition. And there is nothing but God. Nothing but what the Kabbalah describes as the Or Ein Sof, the endless light of God. It fills all, it suffuses all, it transcends all, it permeates all, it saturates all. There's just this endless light of God. Now, what we're going to do now is go behind the scenes of the creation story. For the creation story, you could read Bereshit. It's all there in Genesis. But here's the story before the creation story. Because here's the issue. If the entire possibility for existence is taken up with God's presence, where is anything else going to exist? Okay? So if your hard drive has all of its capability all full up, you're going to have to erase something if you want to put even one more file on it. That's it. You have no choice. And so this is what the masters of Kabbalah tell us happened before God could bring this yearning, this desire to fruition. First, there has to be a space. There has to be a place this can play out in. And so what happens is something called tzimtzum, contraction, containment. God pulls him herself out of the center to create a spherical vacuum, a chalal panui, an empty space where something could exist other than God. So, how many of you went to Gan Izzy as kids? Raise your hand. Come on, let me see your hands. Have to be more. How many of you listened to Uncle Moshe as children? How many of you know where Hashem is? You know the song? Up, down, right, left, all around. Okay. So that's actually a very sophisticated understanding of God. Because if you stop people on the street and you ask, where is God? They'll say, in heaven. They'll point their finger somewhere up there, like we're supposed to know. But if you ask a God is he kid or an Uncle Moishi junkie, they'll tell you God is everywhere. But that doesn't really cut the mustard either. It's not that God transcends all and fills all and permeates all and is all. It's that we are located in a world that exists within a tiny crevice of the divine. Let me say that again. It's not that there is a universe and there is a God. And the Jews happen to believe that God fills the entire universe and is all. So by the way, when we say Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad, we are not proclaiming that we believe there is one God. Monotheism, that's old hat. That was Abraham's gig. Okay? What we're saying every single day is Hashem Echad. There's only one thing, and that thing happens to be Hashem, God Almighty. And then God gets this overwhelming desire to be in a relationship. And so carves out this tiny crevice in which this world exists. And that, the Kabbalah says, is tzimtzum. And you know what? This is going to sound simplistic. But some of the most important things in life and some of the most profound things in life appear at first blush to be simplistic. So, secret number one for lasting relationships, do what God did. Pull yourself out of the center. It's not about you, dummy. Really, really not. I know it's early Sunday morning and all you have is a bagel in your stomach and this is a very hard message, but I'm telling you, it's number one. I don't know if any of you read this book, but Dr. Bruce Durman wrote a book called We'd Have a Great Relationship If It Weren't For You. The sad thing is that so many people actually live like that. And they are never going to find a lasting relationship. Because they didn't get it yet. Tzimtzum. Pull yourself out of the center. According to our Talmudic sages, Adam and Chava, Adam and Chava, I refuse to call her Eve, because Eve is rooted in the Latin for evil. Yeah, I'm not making that up. And the biblical word Chava is rooted in the word for life, Em Kol Chai. But I digress. That's just one of the tiny differences between Judaism and other theologies. And I hate when people just, the Judeo-Christian creed, like there is such a thing. But I digress. Okay. So, the Talmud tells us that originally they were two aspects of one dimorphous whole. So the first Adam creature was both male and female. Now, when God decides to separate them, this is where we know definitively that God is a woman and she reserves the right to change her mind. So now this separation brought new challenges to the fore. And that is, how do two become one? Now that God has separated the two from each other, how are they going to become one? And that can only be overcome by focusing on the truth, on their soul, on their oneness, on the common source that binds them. In other words, abandoning egocentricity. Which is why it should come as no surprise to readers, even the casual reader of the Bible, that the command to desist from the tree of knowledge, to not eat from the Eitz Hadat, to not eat from the tree of knowledge, comes immediately before the Bible's account of Chava's separation or amputation from Adam. Before her creation as an independent being, and later their subsequent coming together as one. That is, the narrative concerning the creation of humanity is seemingly interrupted by the story, but it's not interrupted at all. Da'at, which is conventionally rendered as knowledge, is actually best understood as consciousness, and specifically self-consciousness. And that, by the way, is the default of all human beings. That's what we are, conscious of ourselves. And always looking for what's going to feed us. So when we're born, it's very clear, it's very primal, and having been privileged to breastfeed many children, I can tell you, they don't wake you up when it's convenient for you, and they will suck all the calcium out of your body. Because that's what they're doing. They're looking for food, and that's what they're supposed to do. And I don't mean to turn anybody off from breastfeeding you. It's the most wonderful thing in the world. I'm just saying that's just the beginning. Okay? So to grow up means to learn how to get off the default called self and make room for others. So anybody who has kids knows you can't even go to the bathroom for 30 seconds without someone banging down the door. When the kids get older, they'll just knock insistently. When they get married, they'll knock a little bit more timidly, or they'll send their spouse. But, that's just what it is, right? So growing up is this journey, this process of putting others before you. So the only thing in the story of creation described as negative is when Adam and Chava are still one being. Lo tov heyot Adam levado. It's not good for a person to be alone in this space of self-centeredness, concentration, and preoccupation, and infatuation with the self. Lo tov, it's not good. So by warning Adam not to eat from the tree, this source of self-awareness and self-centeredness, God is giving us the single most important, and I know, shocking piece of advice. Marriage is not about you. Relationships are not about you. Marriage is actually a divine commandment. I know, shocker. It's not a lifestyle choice from the Jewish perspective. It's actually something God commands us to do. And in that way, our relationships become centrifugal. They're fueled and centered by something higher. So, lesson number 1, you're 1/4 through my talk, in case you're getting itchy. Number 1, pull yourself out of the center. Create space for something higher. Practical takeaway. You know how people are always saying, if you want to have a successful marriage, you have to compromise. Have you heard that? Raise your hand if you've heard that. Oh, a lot more people than went to Don Izzy. Okay. You know what? I don't know about you, but I hate that piece of advice. Compromise, that means that at least 50% of my marriage, I'm doing stuff I don't want to do. Like, what is that? That is not compelling. I'm sorry. It's not. But in Hasidic lingo, we have this term called bitul. Bitul means self-abnegation. Now, before you get turned off, because nobody wants to abnegate the self, just hear me out for one more minute, okay? Bitul means this. Say you have this couple, and they, God forbid, have a very sick child. And they're both in the medical field, and they have very strong, vociferous ideas about how this child should be healed, what therapies to employ, and so on and so forth. Problem is, they're not on the same page at all. So they're arguing and arguing. Their child is getting sicker and sicker. Finally, they understand what they have to do. They have to go to somebody who knows more than both of them. They have to go to the top expert in this field and submit to whatever this person says. Now, no matter what side of the coin they were on, no matter what their opinion was, they will both get 100% of what they want out of this because they want a healthy child. So it's not about which therapy is employed, you follow? It's about abnegating your will to something higher, something larger. So I've given you a very stark and dramatic example. But this is true every single day in relationships and marriage. You have to think, what is it that I really want? What is really important? Those are the things, hopefully, that are important to both of you. And then you're not talking about compromise. You're talking about bittul. You're talking about, yes, I'm going to say it, it's a dirty word, subserviating yourself to something higher than the self. It doesn't have to be your opinion. It just has to be something that you both want. And if that is the best way to get there, that works. What does this mean during these 10 days of repentance? To pull ourselves out of the center. Well, for starters, if God can pull him, herself out of the center, we should make an effort too. But another way of understanding it is to say, in pulling out of the center, in wanting an alliance, in wanting a relationship, by definition, God makes him, herself, vulnerable to our overtures. There is a subservience there. It's an audacious theological idea. In some way that we cannot fathom, hopefully, God actually needs us. Really needs us. And that's why God pulled out of the center and created this space we can walk around in. And we can feel somewhat autonomous or extremely autonomous, depending on where we are in our heads. COVID was good for us, I think. A little bit it put us in our places. A little bit it also shone a light on our hubris and our incredible arrogance when we couldn't control something. Like the chutzpah of this virus. Like, really? I'm not going to go on that rant right now. I'll just say, we need to pull ourselves out of the center. But at this point, somebody, at least here, should have been going to the table to get some pieces of tomato to throw at me, for heaven's sake, because that's really heretical to talk about a space that is bereft of God's presence. I'm talking to you about God pulling out of the center and creating a spherical vacuum so that this world, in Hebrew we call the world, come on, you know this? Olam. The Hebrew word olam, etymologically rooted in the word he'elem, which means shrouded and obscured. So God hides behind this world so that we can have that sense of autonomy and freedom, which allows us to choose God of our own volition, which makes this a relationship, by the way. You cannot have a relationship if you don't choose it. So what the stock person at Walmart has with those cans of corn is not a relationship, because the corn can't say, get your grubby fingers off of me. But God gives us enough freedom to say, oh, God, that's a crutch for the weak, the opiate for the masses. I'm just too sophisticated to believe in that stuff. Only with that possibility can we actually choose to embrace God. So what is this business of saying that there is a space empty of God? God is all, God fills all. Let me just tell you that to get up from your seat, wherever you're sitting, and walk through the door of this townhouse, you literally have to swim through God. No, I'm not smoking anything. Okay? But if you think this is funny, and you think I'm not saying the truth, let me tell you what you sound like. You sound like the time I went snorkeling and I heard two fish. I know it's rude to eavesdrop, but I was so riveted by their conversation. One was like, do you believe in water? And the other one says, it's so funny you should ask, because just last night at dinner we were talking about this, because our grandparents used to believe in water. Then, like, our parents, they sort of kind of wandered away from that idea. But I'm starting to believe that actually there might be something to it. That never happened. But it happens every single day, where people are like, do you believe in God? I don't know. Not sure. Anyway, just saying, you got to swim to God, through God, to get out of here. So what do we mean when we say that God created a vacuum? We're talking about a space in which godliness, like I said earlier, is obfuscated. You know how the sounds that certain creatures make, including dogs, are not always something we can hear, but they can hear things on a much higher pitch than we can? So it's not like the sounds are not there, it's just we can't hear them. I mean, if we opened a radio or whatever appliance or implement or device, we'd hear a whole bunch of stuff that's coursing through the sound waves right now. We're just not plugged in. So when we say that this space is empty of God, we don't really mean that. We mean that God's presence is imperceptible. So there's a space where God's light is unfettered, where there is that searing heat and blinding light of God, and there's a space where that light of God is shrouded and obscured. It's a different type of manifestation, which brings me to secret number 2. If you want to succeed in a relationship, any kind, you've got to recognize and appreciate differences. If you're in a relationship, you're working on it, you want to be, you got to celebrate the differences. You have to cherish them. You have to protect them. Don't violate this. Just like there are 2 types of light of God, 2 types of energy, the ultimate reason for this is to effect a more solid union. It's the same thing with us. There are real differences. Let me tell you, my husband and I are, and all the beautiful people here can attest for this, we are really different people. But we're 2 halves of one. It does work. I'm telling you. They say it's the differences that attract you, but it's what you share that keeps you together. So that's what you got to keep your eye on. So, back to the term dot, and Eitz Hadat, consciousness. Consciousness is not a bad thing. It's the self-consciousness that's the root of all evil. That's the root of all pathology. But consciousness, it's very important. In fact, hey, what's the biblical word for intimacy? You know, when they wink at you and they say to know in the biblical sense? It's dot. Adam yada et chava. There we are. We're right back to it. But what the Torah is telling us is outer directed consciousness. That's what you need to be conscious of. The other person. And to do that, you have to appreciate that they are different from you. The Talmud, like I said, teaches that in their primal iteration, Adam and Chava were just 2 halves of one thing. But here's the thing. They were soldered together by their backs. They were configured back to back. It was only when they were separated that he was able to see her. Maybe you recognize this syndrome. I do. There are a lot of people who are in alleged relationships, unfortunately, back to back. They cannot see each other. They're talking right past each other in 2 different directions. They cannot see each other. This is not okay. So in that primal iteration, Adam could feel Chava, but he couldn't see her. He was conscious of her, but in an abstruse way, in some esoteric way. He couldn't really unite with her. It was only when he was able to see her as a separate entity and take in all the differences that they could actually begin to become one. The English word respect actually emerges from the Latin respice, which means to gaze at, to see, to truly discern. Now, if you look in Tanakh, in the Jewish canon, we find, strangely enough, this is actually fascinating, that the word for recognition, to recognize, and the word for stranger are both rooted in the same shoresh, in the same etymon. Now, how does that work? If you recognize someone, then by definition, they're not a stranger, right? A stranger is somebody you don't yet recognize. And yet, our tradition is telling us that there is a very important correlation here. I think what the Torah is telling us is that the deepest type of recognition The deepest kind always depends on there being somewhat of a strangeness, somewhat of a cloaking, somewhat of a modesty. Let's call it borders, differences. This is what modesty attracts. The unknown beckons. It entices. It asks to be revealed. This is actually what romance thrives on, knowing the unknowable. So paradoxically, God separates Adam from Chava, Chava from Adam, so that they can look at each other and become one, but their oneness depends on their being two, on their being separate, on the delicate balance of looking, respecting, but never knowing all. Being the known, but the unknowable. Not so unlike Moshe at the burning bush. Not so unlike God saying to Moshe, you can't see all of me and live. It's just not possible. It's why Rivkah, our matriarch, veiled herself when she knew she was coming to see Yitzchak, Isaac, her husband. Now, these two people knew they were a done deal, trust me. This was all divinely orchestrated in a very obvious way. So it wasn't like they weren't going to get married. But what she was doing, our commentators tell us, was telling Yitzchak, okay, I know this is what's going to happen here, but first of all, you need to know that there will always be aspects of me that you will not quite know. And indeed, we see that later, that they see things very differently. So this is sometimes surprising to people, but let me just tell you, no matter who you're married to, for how long, and how happily married you are, this is what I wish on every single one of you. Every person still retains that holy of holies, that place where nobody else goes. There's that cloak. There's that strangeness in the recognition. And that's important. Recognition of that strangeness leads to knowledge in the biblical sense, true intimacy. So, secret number 2, recognize, respect differences, how important they truly are to achieving real intimacy or collusion or health in a relationship, even in the workplace. Now, vis-a-vis our relationship with God, hey, this should be so elementary, and yet we're still so stuck on this. Somebody very smart, I wish it was me, but it wasn't, once said, God created us in His image, and ever since we've been trying to return the favor. Seriously, we're always trying to create God in our image. We're like, God, this doesn't make sense. Oh, right. You don't understand it, so it doesn't make sense to the infinite creator of this world. I got that. I see how that works, right? So simple. In these 10 days of higher consciousness, let's just remember to respect the differences between us and the creator of the universe. For starters, baby steps. Every once in a while, we should try to remember who we are. And if we're trying to recreate God in our image, quit while you're ahead. Do another startup. So that's 2. So first, God pulls out of the center. So now we have a space where godliness is so hidden that there are people walking around saying, come on, you don't really believe that garbage about a God, right? Okay. But right outside the confines of this tiny place called the universe is still that unlimited, unvarnished, unfettered, blinding, searing, unlimited, infinite light of God. And that's where we have the differences. Okay, we're good now. Now we have to get to business. How are people going to exist in this universe if God actually completely pulls away? Can't happen. King David alluded to this in the Psalms when he says, Ki shemesh u'magen Hashem Elokim. God is both the sun and the shade and the cloud. In plain English, and last time I didn't have the amount of miles, but now I do. Remember? don't remember. Somebody had to give me the amount of miles, but now I wrote them down because I didn't want to forget. Got it. The sun is one astronomical unit, 92 million miles, give or take, depending on the time of year, from planet Earth. What happens if the sun and the earth move closer to each other? Come on. We're done. We become subsumed in the orb. What happens if they move a little bit farther away from each other? We're done. We're done. We're finished. So God has to be both the sun and the shield. We need the rays of the sun. We cannot exist without its warmth and its light. But we can't get too close. And so the third aspect in the pre-creation story that Kabbalah teaches is that God beamed into this spherical vacuum we live in, we call home, a concentrated vector of divine light, a kav, a concentrated vector of divine light that rotated around the parameters of this space we call Olam 10 times. So we have 10 different aspects of the divine, 10 different energies, and these vivify our world and allow us to exist, much like the rays of the sun. So what's secret number 3? Again, I'm telling you, this gets more and more elementary as we go on. Okay? So secret number 1 was pull out of the center. Secret number 2 was appreciate and recognize differences. Secret number 3, give. You have to give. Ahava, the Hebrew word for love, milashon ahiv, is rooted etymologically in the Aramaic term to give, not to get, by the way. It's not about the roses and the chocolates and the blah, blah, blah. It's about what you give. And to give means to really be there in the way that person needs and recognizes. This is a very small planet, so I'm not going to use names because I never know who knows who. But I have a very close friend who runs a Chabad center, and when they moved into a new location, like on day 2, they have a pretty large family, so she's probably running around trying to find the diapers and the bottles, and she sees this insanely large truck pull up on her property, and without even a ring of the doorbell, they start unloading like 50 trees. So she runs down the steps, and she speaks to the driver, and she says, "Excuse me, but I think there's some mistake here." And they're like, "No." They show her the paper. It's that address, and they inform her that this is a gift. This is a housewarming gift from a good friend. And in the next breath, they give her a bunch of papers as thick as a telephone book to care for these trees. This is what the woman needed. Clearly, she has a small family of 11 children, Leah and Hara, and this is what she needed. A full-time job taking care of these trees, or to pay a king's ransom to hire someone to do it. But this person did it in good faith, I promise you. I am sure it cost them a pretty penny to get those trees over to their estate there, to their property. But it wasn't what they needed. So when we're looking to be there for somebody, it has to be for them, not for us. It's easy to give a gift that you would like. That's a present. That's not presence. And that's what we need to do. All the time we hear people talking about how an affair started. It just started. They make it sound like, I don't know, like slipping on the ice, a car accident because a deer came out of nowhere, spontaneous combustion. Don't believe it. But don't believe me, because what do I know about these things? But I do know how to quote people who do know about these things. So, psychologist Shirley P. Glass, she built her career on studying infidelity. And she has this amazing theory. Much like any building, like any structure, because a relationship is a structure, you need to have walls and windows. You need to have walls that delineate space And you need to have windows that open the space. Got that? All right. What happens when you violate the very basic premise of architecture? And here's what it looks like. You're at work, and I don't know, maybe you had one too many, or I don't know what happened, and you start to talk to one of your coworkers, and you share something you really shouldn't. It really only belongs with you and your significant other. All right, so you talk, and this person's listening, and humans have this streak of voyeurism. It's about gradation and your ability to cloak it. So everybody's interested, right, in somebody's salacious secret. The more salacious, the more interested. So now you're sharing more and more. Okay. You have now opened up a window where there should have been a weight-bearing wall. So here's what happens when you come home at dinner. You're sitting across your spouse, and this is where you're supposed to be talking about your day, sharing your day, catching up. But instead, you know what you did that day. So what goes up is a wall where there's supposed to be a window. And now the space you're in becomes dark and dank and stultifying and claustrophobic, and neither one of you can breathe. And you don't yet know why you can't breathe. But then the next day, you go back to work, and you tell this person just how obtuse your husband is. You're trying to talk to them, but they couldn't hear you. They weren't listening. And so then, when the kiss comes out of nowhere as a complete surprise, because you've put a window where there was supposed to be a wall, and a wall where there was supposed to be a window, and now you found true love. And let me just give you a free piece of advice. Love and infatuation are two very different things. Infatuation is, love's very shady second cousin, the one that borrows your car and returns it with an empty tank. And that stolen kiss did not come out of nowhere. You created that because you didn't have respect for the structure. So, give. We have to keep giving, nourishing, nurturing, and making sure our borders are where they're supposed to be. Our windows are our windows, and our walls are our walls. Vis-a-vis God, what does it mean to give? It means to take seriously that we are in a spousal relationship. When the Song of Songs was being considered for inclusion in the Jewish canon, in the Tanakh, the sages were like, no, not this. This is too graphic. This is too raunchy. This is too explicit. The Tanakh has to be like it has to be on the coffee table. Like everybody has to be able to look at it. And we're not having any of this R-rated stuff. And Rabbi Akiva won the day. He said, guys, I don't know if he called them guys, or he said Chaverai or Rabbatai, but basically, guys, you got this all wrong. The Shir Hashirim, the Song of Songs written by King Solomon, is not something we need to be skittish about or embarrassed about. It is the holiest book of the entire canon because it speaks directly to the kind of relationship we have with God, which, by the way, is not a platonic relationship. So it's not like we can go to shul once a year and be like, God, you're looking great, and that colored lipstick, excellent. No, that does not work. That's not what it means to be in a spousal relationship. A spousal relationship is lips on lips, and yes, bodily fluids, and all the messiness. Yes, that's what it means to make love with God. And God is waiting for that. God needs that. That's what it means for us to give. And finally, the fourth secret. I told you, they're going to become more and more intuitive as we go on. And it was already intuitive. But sometimes people have a hard time with this one. So after God pulls out of the center and then beams in this vector of concentrated light that precisely can nourish human life on this planet in all of its iterations. All of life, not just human life, plant life, animal life, and so on and so forth. Then God says, okay, it's your turn. Tamlichuni alechem. Make me your king. In plain English, the fourth secret is take, receive. Some people have a very hard time, especially women, with taking. They think they have to give. You want another cup of tea? Wait, you want another sandwich? Oh, wait, you're traveling 4 hours. Wait, let me give you another bag of food. Jackie Mason, Olav Shalom. He said the Jews, they say goodbye, they never leave. Because they're so busy preparing for the trip, and especially the woman with another sandwich, another drink. Oh, wait, you need wet wipes? What can I get you? If you're in a relationship with someone and you can never receive, you have rendered them superfluous. Your relationship is dead on arrival. There's nothing to talk about. Yeah, it sounds heretical, but God does need us. Now, before you leave here with a swelled head, if it's not for God's desire, we would indeed be superfluous. You know what a very smart person once said? You want to see just how important you are and just how irreplaceable you are. Put your finger in a bucket of water. Now take your finger out. That's how irreplaceable you are. It's all good. But God desired differently. God desired for us to make a difference, to be necessary. So on one hand, none of us are entirely necessary to the existence of the universe. But given God's desire and the system God put into place, we absolutely do have purpose. We have a mission. So in our personal relationships, we have to learn to make ourselves porous, to get off of our pride and make ourselves vulnerable, to open ourselves up to taking, to needing. Because that's the only way you can actually have a vibrant relationship. And make sure the other person knows how much you value what you give them and how much you mean to them. And how if you weren't in their life wouldn't just be what it is. Now, vis-a-vis God, it's not hard for us to do this part. We're experts at taking. But we have to learn how to receive and to do so with humility and consciousness. If somebody asks you, if you were deaf, how much would you pay to have your hearing restored? I'm betting an easy $1 billion. Blind? Many hundreds of billions of dollars. Ambulatory? Same. Think about it. If you walked in here on your own 2 feet and you can see me and you can hear me, you're a multi-billionaire. Are you breathing spontaneously? There's all this stuff we're constantly receiving. And we're good at that. We perfected the art of taking. But we need to be conscious and more grateful and more appreciative. In conclusion, we're taught, as I said earlier, that we're created in God's image. And this can mean many things. Everybody loves to quote this, B'Tselem Elokim, B'Tselem Elokim. It's trans-denominational. Everybody can feel comfortable with this. There are many, many ways of understanding this, but the one I have embraced personally is this. We're taught that God created this world out of nothingness. Yesh me'ayin. If you're nodding your head, you're a liar. Because we don't know nothingness. So if you're trying to tell me you know that, you heard that's yesh me'ayin, you might have heard it, but what does it mean? We don't know nothingness. We have never bumped into nothingness. We will never bump into nothingness. Because everything we know, everything we experience, everything we've ever known or ever will imagine and conceive begins from somethingness. But God actually created this world out of nothingness. Nada. Zilch. which means for the world to remain in existence, God has to keep recreating it every nanosecond in an unceasing, pulsing, vivifying force that recreates the world. This world is not like a silver vase, where there was silver before, the craftsperson crafts it into a vase, and now it can stand on the table and look pretty, and you put gorgeous flowers there for Shabbos. No. This world came out of nothingness and constantly has to be recreated. And if you don't believe me, check it out. In the morning liturgy, every single day we say this right before Shema. Hamachadesh b'tuvo b'chol yom tamid ma'aseh bereshis. God renews in our kindness every single day, all the time, this world that we live in. So if we were created in God's image, that means we have the capacity to make choices that we would choose every day, every minute of every day, again and again, over and over and over. So, with Yom Kippur approaching, from the bottom of my heart, I wish us all of you, all of me, all of our jagged edges, all our curves, all of us. Help me with the lyrics there. Oh, come on, don't shake your head. Everybody knows this one. Gabby. All of me, all of you. Yeah, all your curves and all your jagged edges, all your imperfections, right? Okay, whatever. Okay, so all of us, may we be blessed to actually live as created in God's image, to find relationships that we would choose again and again and again anew, every day, every minute, every nanosecond. And may we have the seichel, which is French for intelligence, to keep nurturing and nourishing, keep pulling ourselves out of the center, keep recognizing and cherishing the differences, keep giving and keep receiving, and consciously do the same thing in our relationship with God. I wish you all a Gemar Chatima Tova. May we all be sealed in the book of life for a year of goodness in every conceivable way, and all in the most open and revealed fashion.
Amen.
Can I open up the floor for questions? Anybody have anything they want to say? Ask, cheer, come on.
I have a question.
Oh, good. It only takes one.
The first step
Okay, you
was
gotta scream.
to pull back, right?
Yes.
And to just like focus on the other person.
Right.
But the last one was to receive. So
Right.
what's that balance of like, okay, this isn't about me, let me give, but also like to receive. Like I feel like those two are like hard to figure out when to do what that balance is.
Okay, that's a good question for those who didn't hear. How do you balance pulling yourself out of the center and at the same time being attentive to the other and being present and giving? First of all, it helps when you're in a relationship with somebody who is themselves following this model. Okay. But like I said, some people are stuck. Some people are stuck in the back-to-back relationship. They think they have a great relationship, but weren't for you. Okay. When you recognize that, pay the tab and leave. Don't stay in that. Don't stay in that place. Even if there's a part of it that's comfortable and good and exciting, don't stay there. Okay. Now, it is a balance, like you said, but all of life is a binary, and all of life is about balancing. But when you get to a place where you realize that to be in a relationship is a privilege, it's not a chore. Like if you were to ask me, why do you cook dinner for your husband, which I totally don't do most of the time because I don't have time, but he understands. But let's say I were to tell you, oh, I cook dinner for my husband because if I cook dinner for him 6 days in a row, he takes me to Cancun. So I know, what might be the people are saying, like, that's not happening. Nowhere in hell is that happening. Our Islam's not taking Rivkah to Cancun. Okay, whatever. Okay, but let's say I told you that. And you'd be like, wow, cool, right? No, that's disgusting. It's only less abhorrent than if I told you, if I don't cook dinner for him 5 days in a row, he beats me silly. Oh, then you'd be like calling, protective services for me. But actually, it's two sides of the same coin. Why would you do something for someone you love? Because you love them. So like if you told me you're gonna go hang out with your friend and I ask you, oh, how much does she pay to hang out with you? You'd be like, wait, you think I'm such a loser? My mother pays her to hang out with me? But while you're laughing and you think this is silly, unfortunately people do this all the time vis-a-vis God. Oh, what do I have to do to get God to take me to Cancun? How many mitzvot? How many pages of this prayer book do I have to say? Oh my God. Okay, I'll say another 60. That's missing the whole point. That's not a relationship. So, to your question, yes, it is about pulling out of the center and realizing that there's something higher that you're going to build together. But that's not contraindicated to receiving, to accepting, to taking, to make yourself vulnerable at the same time. It's part of it, actually. Because people who can't make themselves vulnerable are so busy shoring themselves up, I promise you there is no room in that head for anybody else. They cannot show a crack in the facade. That's a full-time job. They don't have time for relationships. Yes. I actually never respond to that appellation except out of respect to the host. Alex.
When you were saying about how you're not supposed to ever fully know the person, like you can't do that, it kind of seems strange because I feel like the whole relationship you are trying to get them to know you and you are trying to get to know them, and so it kind of seems like, are you supposed to just not give up but just be like, oh, it's okay, he's not gonna just understand that about me? Or
okay, this is a very profound question. I am not surprised at all because Alex has never asked me a question that was anything less than profound. Remember those Friday afternoons?
Love them.
Miss
them.
in the room upstairs? Yeah. So always this kind of question. Very important question. Yes. Oh yes, repeat the question. Question is, I said something that sounded totally counterintuitive in terms of relationship advice, which is that you have to respect that there are going to be aspects of the person that you are married to even for 40 years, that you will never quite know or understand. And I actually was chutzpahdik enough to suggest that that's okay, and even the way it's supposed to be. Now, I'm not saying that they should have another woman, accounts offshore that you don't know about, God knows what's going on. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the fact that every person has a distinctiveness about them. And they have a place that's only theirs. And when you try to push and get in there, there'll be a boomerang effect. That will not bring intimacy in its wake. Because we have this innate need to keep that space sacred. So there's a threshold. It doesn't mean you want to die for this person, you go to the moon and back, you love them, you're committed, you make yourself completely vulnerable, but you also respect that there are things about this person or in this person that you will never understand in their way. And that's okay. And by the way, that becomes very emancipating. Because otherwise you're like, oh my God, wait, I don't understand why he says that. You know what? Fine. If that's, again, unless something bad, dangerous, not okay is going on, okay, that's the way he understands it, that's the way he sees it, this is what floats his boat. My husband's idea of a vacation is to sit on the couch and read, which works out very well for us because we have neither time nor money. But if that wasn't the case, it would not work out very well. So I would just have to travel on my own, I suppose, or drag him against his will. I have to respect that. I have to respect that in his mind, that's his perfect vacay. What am I going to do about it? He doesn't want to see China, I do. Yes?
So I really liked your architecture example, and I'm curious how we develop the self-awareness to know where we have a wall where we should have a window. And when we're ready to do that renovation, how we can support ourselves in such a way that it's not going to collapse onto us or crush the people around us when we're trying to make those changes.
Another very important question. How do we create that structure so that it's viable and long-standing and protective, and the walls and the windows are in the right place and they don't just implode on us? This is where you're going to force me to use my Rebbitzin card, which I abhor. The good news is the creator of the universe has already given us the blueprint. It's all there. So the Torah tells us very clearly what's a wall, where there's a wall, and where there's a window. It's when we start coloring outside of the lines and we start breaking down walls and putting in windows by ourselves where we get into trouble. But it's not a secret. It's all in the good book. Not satisfied.
We can talk offline.
That's the hard part of this. The hard part about this is actually coming to grips with the fact that we don't have all the answers. And that it takes something higher, something transcendent. And sometimes we want to put a window where a weight-bearing wall belongs. Because we're not really all architects. And we're like, oh, my kitchen would look so good if we knocked this wall out. Yeah, and you wouldn't have a house. The rabbi has a question. I have to come closer to you. Okay.
How relationships should be about you, but about the other. That was the first part of the plan. But how does that apply to people who are dating or not yet in a relationship? Because sitting when you're dating, it's just more looking out for yourself. Does this person fit for me? How do we reconcile that with the dating period?
The rabbi asks a good question. It's like some kind of joke. Question is, when you're dating, people are looking out for themselves. So if building a relationship is not about yourself, then how do you go about dating? I would say what these guys from Binghamton have heard me say a million times. People have to start dating intelligently. So this is probably going to be shocking, but thankfully all of you are sitting. So Charles Darwin is not my spiritual mentor, but he did say something really important and intelligent. Many things intelligent. This also important. And that is that man breeds his horses with greater care than he breeds himself. It's true. People are really, if they like horses, and they want a thoroughbred, they're going to do their homework. Even dogs. You can't imagine how many times I get notes from people. They just got a new dog, and then they give me 3 pages description about the breed of the dog. I know nothing about dogs, but anyway, I'm happy to learn. But when it comes to us, we're like, oh, I met him, and our eyes locked, and and here he is. It's like, that makes so much sense. We're gonna research the school we go to, even undergrad. Obviously, we're gonna research before we invest our funds. What do you think, we're an idiot? But the person we're gonna get married to, our whole life, that's, it's gonna happen. I'm gonna go to a party, we're gonna meet. So to your question, dating intelligently means dating with a higher purpose. And there you're already not just about you. It's about you finding a partner to climb in love with, so that you can create this structure, that long-lasting structure. I have a lot more to say about that, but the hour is late. Last words? Anybody? All right. Yes.
Yeah.
Can you get up and scream in my direction?
For people that might have come late, just on this side of the room.
Yes.
You just recap the 4 segments so that they will be able to hear that.
Yes. Cliff notes. Number 1. Are you listening?
Yes.
You hear me?
Yes.
Do you have a pen or a phone? Because you're going to forget. Okay, number 1, pull yourself out of the center. Yeah, that's yourself, as great as you are. There was once a chassid. He came to his Rebbe. He said, "I don't know what to do, Rebbe. Wherever I go, people step on me." And the Rebbe said, "Maybe you're just spreading yourself out everywhere a little bit too much." Okay, number 1, pull yourself out of the center. Number 2, recognize, appreciate, and cherish the differences. Number 3, give. You gotta give in a way that's important to the person you're giving to, not to you. And number 4, you have to be able to receive. That's a good an ending as any. Thank you so much, everybody. I wish you an easy fast, but not too easy, because Yom Kippur should be some hard work on our part. See you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rivkah Slonim, for your inspiring words. Your reputation is very well justified. This is the 3rd year that the foundation has sponsored a guest speaker during Aseres Teshuvah, together with the Chabad Young Professionals of the Upper East Side. All 3 speakers have been women. It's a beautiful tribute to Daniella to have this program dedicated in her honor, and especially to present 3 wonderful women covering topics that were relevant to her outlook on life and understanding of Judaism. I want to thank Rabbi Yosef and Devorah Wilhelm for hosting the event. I want to single out Ethan for arranging the entire program. Ethan was responsible for conceiving the idea of the program, for executing the program, and maintaining it for 3 years now. And I hope that for many years, this will be a permanent part of the Daniella Moffson Foundation calendar. Everyone, thank you for attending, and Gamar Chatima Tova.